Hello, thank you for joining us today for this Citation Station series. Today we will be talking about AMA, the American Medical Association style. So this will be just a brief intro to AMA. I am Emily Newberry, the Research and Scholarship Librarian. Oops. So here's our agenda for today. We will be talking about the American Medical Association style guide and talking about just a little bit about it. And then I'll kind of go over some of the differences, the big differences between APA, the American Psychological Association style, which you may be familiar with, and AMA. And those two are kind of, you'll see a lot of journals in the medical field either do APA or AMA. So those are the two that you'll probably be dealing with the most if you're in dealing with healthcare journals. So then we'll talk about citing, how you cite things within the manuscript that you're writing, the elements of the citation, and then I'll give you some examples, some resources, and then there'll be time for questions at the end. So this here, you can see a picture. This is a cover of the current edition. So we are on to the 11th edition of AMA. It is actually put out by the Journal of the American Medical Association. So you may see JAMA, J-A-M-A, but the style is AMA. So just a little bit of history. The first guide was put out in 1962, and back then it was only 68 pages. It was just meant as a little sort of brief style guide, but now it is, a very big deal in the medical literature, beyond journals and all that. So it is nearly 1,200 pages now. And just like the other citation styles, the citations that AMA uses at the end of the paper are called references. So we'll be kind of using citations and references interchangeably in this presentation. But it's essentially how you can identify the items that the author used within their work, right? So that, as you're writing an article or a book or something like that, you want to give credit to the people who generated the ideas in the first place, right? So all of these different styles are ways to do that. And this is the way that's been developed and used within the American Medical Association journals. They use a superscript, which we'll get into, rather than the parenthetical citations that you may be used to for APA. So when you're reading an article, you may see parentheses, last name, page numbers, year, that kind of thing. In AMA, you'll just see numbers. And essentially, this entire presentation, the content of it, is covered in Chapter 3 of the American Medical Association Manual of Style. That chapter is entirely dedicated to references, which is what we'll be covering in this presentation. This is meant to be just a brief overview of the actual references and not getting into sort of the editing and writing of papers and all that. But the actual style guide does get into that for you if you need it. So here are just some highlighting of some of the differences that you'll see between APA and AMA. So as I already mentioned, APA uses those in-text parenthetical citations. So at the end of the sentence, they'll have the author's name. AMA uses a superscript, so it'll be a number just at the end of the idea that's being cited. APA, they do require page numbers for a quote, where in AMA, the page numbers are optional. In APA, the references are listed alphabetically. So you'll see that reference list at the end, and it doesn't matter where things were referenced within the article, they're listed by the first author's last name or the organization, if it's an organization as an author. Where in AMA, the references are listed in the order in which they were referenced. So we'll see that it kind of, if a item is referenced again, you'll just reference that original number that was assigned to it originally, and we'll show that too. Current APA requires a linked DOI, where AMA does not. They have you listed as a numerical value. I have seen it linked, and I don't think that that's wrong necessarily, but AMA is a little bit more flexible with that DOI. Okay, so now we'll talk about citing within the manuscript. So as you're writing your paper, as you're writing your article, whatever it is, and you're using AMA, as I said, it's an author number citation system, unlike the others that use author and dates and parenthetical references. These use a superscript, and the superscript, as you're writing your paper, you'll assign numerically to each reference in order that you use them. So the superscript reference, it should happen immediately after the idea. So even if it's in the middle of a sentence, if you're referencing a study, those numbers will go right after the idea that you're referenced, not at the end of the sentence. And again, as I said, you would repeat a number. If you're referencing it later on additional times, you would just keep putting that original number in. And then if you're doing more than one reference at a time, you want to list the numbers as superscript, and you can use a dash if they're consecutive. and if not, use commas. And this hopefully will make a little bit more sense here. This is actually just a little snippet that I took out of the AMA style guide, where you can see they've used AMA style. So you can see here the citations, it just has a little superscript number at the end of each reference. So here we have 4, 5, and 6. And at the end of this concept here, they cited 3, 4, 5, and 6. So they just, and they could have done 3 through 6 in this instance. They did it with commas. Either one is acceptable. Usually I see where it's like 3, 4-6, something like that. If they were non-consecutive. And then you can see here that they referenced whatever they had referenced up in the third, as the third reference, they mentioned it and referenced it again. And so they just reassigned that 3 that was assigned to that original citation. So hopefully that kind of clears up what I've been talking about with the superscripts and how they're laid out within the article. So you see there's no parenthetical, no names, no dates, nothing, just these little superscript numbers. So breaking down an actual reference, these are the references that you'll see sort of at the end of the paper into what elements they include. So here we have the author at the beginning. And then we have the article title, abbreviated journal name. We'll get into each one of these individually. And then I kind of broke this up here. You could do this either way, but I have for the date, I have year, volume, number, and inclusive pages, since those are kind of one unit, even though the inclusive pages is a little bit more source related. But you can see as we get in here how these are kind of broken up. And then the DOI is at the end, and that is the digital object identifier. And that's the permanent identifier in order to find these articles if you need to find them later on. So as far as the punctuation in the references go, a period separates all the elements except for a DOI. So you can see here, there's a period here, period here, period here. There is no period at the end of the DOI. And then the titles use regular text case aside from the journal title, which is in italics. So regular text case means the first letter of the title will be abbreviated. The rest of the title will not be. So any other words in that, unless it's a proper noun, will not be capitalized. This is a chart from chapter 3 of the AMA book, and it talks about that author element. So going back here, when you list your author or authors, you will list them with their last name, capitalized, obviously, no comma. You just put their last name, space, and then their first 2 initials. So you can see here with one author, we have Doe space JF period. If you have 2 authors, you will separate them with a comma. You will list up to 6 authors if you have 6 or less authors. And then once you get into more than 6 authors, you will list the first 3 separated by commas, and then et al. Period. So if it's 20 authors, you will still just list the first 3 and then put et al. Period. And this is, if you have a person in a group, or if you have more than 6 people in a group, you would separate it with a semicolon, the person from the group. And then at the very end, here's how you would list out a group author name. And again, you can find this in chapter 3's chart with this information. So that date element then this is how we know how current the citation was and when it was published. And it's generally an AMA listed only as a year. If it's referencing an online reference that, let's say it was an article published in a blog or in a medical online journal or something like that, it may have an updated date, something like that, you would use that. The date is listed after the journal title. And again, there's no parentheses used until we get into the issue piece. And then if pages are used, the colon will separate that out. So here's an example. So this is JAMA, which is the Journal of the American Medical Association. And we'll see later on when we talk about journals, but I'll mention it now too. American Medical Association does not spell out the entire journal name. They use journal abbreviations, and there's a list available. So that's why this is listed as JAMA. So this is from the Journal of the American Medical Association, period. This article was published in 2016, semicolon, and then you have your volume, immediately no spaces, with parentheses. So that's the issue. And then your pages. If you do have something that you accessed online, you would have, instead of the date, you would have something like accessed June 18th, 2019. You would have that appended to the end of it. If you knew the publication date, you would have that included along with the access. But if you don't know the publication date, then you would just say when you accessed it. So for the title element, that's basically the part of the reference that is going to talk about the work that you're citing. So the chapter, the article, the book, and if it's a book that has chapters, that'll be the standalone piece. Books, you'll cite or book chapters, you'll cite the book that it goes with as well. So you will italicize a standalone title or a journal title only. You will not italicize the article name or a chapter name. And then you want to separate the subtitles, if there is a subtitle, with a colon. And then you're only going to capitalize the very first letter of the actual title. So the subtitle, the first letter does not get a capitalization unless it's a proper noun. And then AMA also uses journal abbreviations. So if you come into this link here, you should be able to look up whatever journal. JAMA Ophthalmology. And right here, it gives you the abbreviation. So you can see that that is the abbreviation to put into your citation for that particular journal title. And so you can look up any of the journals that are part of the PubMed cited collections. So here is a kind of blurry example. I took this right out of the guide as well, but just kind of talking about those different pieces. So we can see we start with the authors here. So last name, initial, comma, last name, and then et al. Then we have our title, and you can see the title is capitalized at the beginning. No other capitalizations within here, no proper nouns, period. And then the abbreviated journal, so JAMA Pediatric for Journal of the American Medical Association Pediatrics. The year, the volume number, the issue. This is called the E locator, and then that DOI at the very end here. So getting into the actual items themselves and how we would cite those. For articles, we're going to be using the author's surnames and initials, as we covered, the title of the article, the abbreviated name of the journal, the year, the volume number, the issue, the part or supplement number if it's pertinent, location, so that would be the pages, or an e-locator if that's relevant, and then a DOI. And DOIs generally are supplied within the article, especially if you're finding them, online. They should have a DOI identified. And if you ever have any issues identifying any of these, feel free to contact us. We can try to help you find the information. So here are some examples. So this is a journal with page numbers. So we can see here how that looks. And then here, right after, there's the date, the volume number, issue, and then the pages listed, and then that DOI. And then here is an article that was published online. So this was never published in print. So it was, something that was found, that was born on the web, essentially. So the author's title of that article, journal or magazine or online source, and then the publication date for this along with the DOI. So moving on to books, which is, I'm just going to cover articles and books today because those are the two most commonly cited things. The rest, there's a lot more a lot more items are covered in the style guide. So if you ever have any questions, you can look those up in there. But for books, we're going to do the chapter authors, surnames, and initials if you're doing a chapter or a piece within an edited work, and then the chapter title, and then the book authors or editors if it's edited work, title, volume number, and volume title when there's more than one volume. Otherwise, you wouldn't indicate that. Edition number, if it's the first edition, you would not indicate that either. The name of the publisher, the year of the copyright, and then the pages when specific pages are cited. So here are quite a few examples here, but this is just a standard book. That's pretty standard, pretty easy, straightforward citation there. Edited book, here we can see the editors listed at the beginning because that is, we are citing the entire book. If you have more than 6 editors, here is how you would do that. So these are the, et al, comma, eds, and then that period. If it's a group as an author, that's what we have it all listed out here. They have the an acronym, which they've listed as well in parentheses with the period. For the ebook, the difference here is you would say, the date of publication, and then add this access information for how you accessed the book itself, the ebook. And then if you're citing a chapter within a book, you'll see the chapter authors first, and then the title of that chapter, and then indicating where they found it. It was in, and these are the editors of that larger work with the work itself, The Conceptual Evolution of DSM-5, for the American Psychiatric Publishing Corporation 2011, and then the pages that they referenced. So then moving on to the reference list, which is how you're going to list all of these, as you're putting your citations in, you're adding your superscripts for 1, 2, 3 as you're entering them in. You do not want to start a new page in AMA style. You will just create a space between your article and immediately begin your references. So as I said many times, they're listed in the order in which they were referenced. They won't be referenced more than once. If you reference an article more than once, you'll just use that original number that you assigned it at the beginning. And the word references for the title should be written all in caps and aligned with the left margin. And then if you'll format lists with single spacing with and between the entries. And then the entries are listed the first time they're referenced, which I think I've said that multiple times. We'll see one in a minute here, though, to show you. If you do have missing information, each kind of source has a minimum amount of information that's really needed to provide a complete reference. So look up those individual items within the AMA guide just to make sure that you're doing all the items that are required. AMA is a little bit flexible about omitting some of the information if you cannot locate it. What they really want is just the ability, they want you to do your due diligence in pointing people to the best that you can to the item that you use so that they can find it and that they can read that information as well. So here's an example that I pulled from a reference of a knee pain article that I found that was written in AMA style. So you can see here the references. If my paper were up at the top, basically, if examples of references on this page was the last line of my sentence, I put a space and then all caps references. And then I have my citations aligned with the left margin along with the references. And you can see here they're numbered. And I did not go back and italicize the titles when I copied this. I'm just realizing right now, but this is what it'll look like visually when you see one of these reference lists in AMA. And then here I did italicize them on the screen, but this kind of breaks that up into those elements as well, so you can see how they are situated on this page. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about changing to AMA or from AMA to another style. So you may be writing an article, you may be working on something where you have a journal in mind, and perhaps the journal that you have in mind is requiring APA. So you prepared your paper in APA style, or conversely, you prepared it in AMA style. The article gets rejected and you have to submit to another journal, which may require the opposite style of the one that you were using, right? So I really recommend that in any work that you do, that you use a citation or bibliographic management tool, because those can really, really help, especially in this kind of scenario, because those tools can help you to transfer just with a drop down. It's literally a drop down from one style to another. So you don't have to go in and hand change all of those citations and reorder them, because if you're going from APA to AMA, obviously you'll have to reorder your whole list. But the one note I do want to say about that is that if you didn't start by using the bibliographic management tool in the beginning, you'll have to go back in and do that in order to be able to do those conversions. So I really do recommend, just anytime you're writing a paper, doing research, that you include a citation management tool into your workflow, because it just will make all of this so much easier. Because I have had people that have come, and had that exact scenario. And then before, we had these things available and I didn't know about some of them, they just had to go in and change it all. And it was just such a hassle. So you don't want to have to go through that. So here are some information, just some additional resources for you. The AMA's Manual Style Guide for Authors and Editors, 11th edition. It's not actually linked on this, but we do have a digital version of this through the library. So if you go to our homepage, you can copy that title, paste it in, and the link, the entry will come up for you to be able to access that. The Online Writing Lab at Purdue has a page on AMA style, and the Online Writing Lab at Purdue is a kind of quick reference site that you can go to that has some really good information easy to access information on the different citation styles. And then we have a page with some, useful links through the library itself. And then, of course, here's my contact information. So with that, I just want to stress that if you have any questions or would like to learn more about AMA and want to talk to me, feel free to make an appointment. I'm happy to sit down and talk with you about it. But other than that, are there any questions?
There's a couple that came through chat, Emily.
Okay.
So one is, do you need to clean up the URL if there's like a proxy in it at all? Because I noticed that you had like our lib proxy in those a couple of times. So I was just curious.
Yeah, actually, there is guidance in the book, and if I had a link in there with the proxy piece, that was bad for demonstration purposes. You want to give your users a clean link that essentially will take them to that item without forcing them to log in. And that's what the proxy link that's in this slideshow does, unfortunately. But there is guidance in the AMA guide for how to, it'll show some like bad link examples and then better link examples to kind of help you to get the best link that will get you to where your users want to be. So yeah, don't have proxies within your links.
Okay. One of them is like, are there journals that aren't listed in that catalog with the abbreviations? And if it isn't listed, what do you do?
That is a great question. Every time I've ever looked for a journal, within the medical field in that it's come up. Not to say that that's always going to come up. We do have something else called Ulrich's Global Serials Directory where we can kind of look to see if the journal exists. It won't give us the abbreviation, but it'll at least kind of help us to see, because if the journal is not in there, we might want to scope it out to see if it's, a reputable journal, number one. Number two, though, I know that there's other sources online where you can look up journal abbreviations, and it may go beyond those PubMed Medline journals. But the PubMed Medline journals usually are the biggest, mostly cited. So there's a really good chance that they will show up in that search. All right, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for watching this recorded webinar. Find upcoming webinars to register for at libcal.umflint.edu.